Okay, welcome back to your chapter leader training. So this next section is on chapters. So let's jump right in here. So one question we could ask is, are chapters relevant in an online world? And I don't know if you recognize this from the movie called The Last Samurai, but the conversation that they're having is, are samurai still relevant in this modern Japanese world, which is the time that the movie was set in, right? And what the conclusion that they come to is perhaps nothing could be more necessary. In other words, perhaps in this increasingly online world, people actually getting together and working together, nothing could be more necessary. And I think that's what chapters are about. Because you could say, well, heck, we'll just all tie in by web conference to INCOSE and the heck with chapters, right? But I think we'd miss something, right? So this is kind of the purpose. So INCOSE is about who you know. And you know, they say life is about who you know, not what you know, but who you know. Well, yes, but that's incomplete. It's about who you know and who you can get to know, right? So you don't have to be limited by who you know. You can get to know new people. And INCOSE is a great avenue toward that. This is some of the sort of sales pitch that I give about why join INCOSE, and especially why be involved in a chapter. And by the way, those are two different things. We still have, as you probably know in your chapters, there's a lot of INCOSE members who aren't necessarily active in the chapter, in their local chapter. They may be a member of a local chapter, but they're not active in a local chapter. So that's something I think it's part of the outreach that chapter leaders need to be doing, is reaching out to your members who aren't active in the chapter, trying to entice them, come get involved, come share your latest thing. The interesting thing is some of them are quite involved in INCOSE, in working groups and in other aspects, and maybe you can invite them to bring that work to the chapter somehow, right? As we were just having a conversation in between the training modules here, there's nothing to prevent, and in fact, there's even encouragement for you to allow working groups to form in your chapter to work on specific things. Much like INCOSE International has working groups, you can have a working group in your chapter. And it can be just a few people working on a specific thing that you're excited about or interested in. You can either initially tie it in with the INCOSE working group or not, or tie it in later after you've done some work. It's completely up to you. There's nothing to prevent you from having that kind of a thing and producing work. Ultimately, what you produce may be something you take to INCOSE and they can promote it and distribute it and make more out of it. That's also a possible avenue. All right, moving right along. So what's the mission of a chapter then? The chapters are an essential role in how INCOSE is set up. So it's professional and social programs, and I think both are necessary. I've seen chapters, by the way, go a little bit off track by emphasizing one over the other. In other words, if you have only professional events and never do anything social, that can get a little dry. On the other hand, if you go months and months and just have social programs, then I think you're going to lose something too, because engineers fundamentally are in the chapter to talk engineering, to be involved. They probably have other social outlets, hopefully, right? If INCOSE is your only social outlet, that's another problem. All right, yeah, to get a life, exactly. All right, so chapters also conduct recruitment and retention activities. You're the first line to reach out to a member who may be lapsing, and not renewing in a year. You'll get notification of that. Maybe you talk to them and stuff like that, and that can help. I mean, the INCOSE Central sends them reminders, but there's nothing like a personal, kind of contact and so on. Supporting technical activities, also marketing INCOSE. There's other kinds of things chapters do to reach out in their local communities, to universities, to companies, to other kinds of sponsors, and there's many different kinds of relationships as well. All right, so facilitating then the professional networking. Mostly it's about hosting local activities. As we said before, that's mostly the purpose of chapters, is holding these things. And these are the main formulations. Again, this is not meant to limit you. In other words, you might think of other things that you might want to do in your chapter, but the main things that chapters tend to do are dinner meetings. That tends to be a format that, through our surveys, turn out to be the most popular format, right? Having a dinner meeting with a speaker in one location where people come together, and then with the adjunct of perhaps other satellite locations that tie in from other places. Then they have to arrange their own dinner, I guess, if they're going to be at another location. You can't send the dinner over there to them. They have to work that out. But that kind of meeting, tutorials, which tend to be half-day or full-day programs that you set up maybe on a weekend, or some people do it on weekdays as well. It depends on your chapter's needs, where you bring in someone. Chapters usually charge a bit of money for those. Not a lot, but I say they charge something for those. And the chapter benefits and and so on. Those can be on any number of subjects. Workshops can be a bit longer. Mini conferences can be anything from a day, a couple of days. There are several 2-3 day conferences that are held in the United States sector. For example, like the Great Lakes Regional Conference is one that's been run a number of years. The SEDC, which is Systems Engineering DC, it's put on by the Washington Metro chapter. That's been running for several years. And these are conferences that draw several hundred people. And you know, what the other point about that is if you're interested in doing that in your chapter and you haven't yet, there aren't people around who know how to do it, you can get help from some of those other chapters who know how to do it. Or reach out, and Washington Metro can help you, or the Great Lakes folks. The way the Great Lakes one works, interestingly, there's 3 or 4 chapters that band together to pull off that conference, and they rotate the leadership. So one year, one chapter kind of takes lead, and the other chapters support. The next one, another chapter takes lead. That's an interesting formula to do a regional kind of program. And those folks will be happy to talk your ear off about how they do it and how you could do it too, right? A question?
How far do people have to come to go to like the Great Lakes chapter? Do they get people to drive 50 miles?
You know, I don't know the direct answer. I know there were a number of people who came quite a distance and flew in.
I've gone from Kansas, and that's 500 miles.
Yeah. So my philosophy on these little conferences is the ones that I've been to have been, they're like hidden treasure, right? They're really, really good. And we don't, as engineers, we're not so oriented toward promotion, so we probably don't promote them enough, you know? But they're high quality, which is not necessarily indicated by the number of people that come, right? But if people knew about them, I think people would come quite a distance because it's a valuable thing. I mean, I remember going to the one in Southern Virginia one time. I was in the Washington area. That was a bit of a trip, right? But it was great. Okay.
Yeah, so the Great Lakes is Lake Superior, which is Minnesota, so they're trying to engage us.
Yep.
We are warming up to the idea.
There you go. Participate. That's right. Exactly. Warming up. Minnesota, warming up. Get it? Yeah. All right. So what else do chapters do? They contribute to working groups, as we talked about, announcements and news, local initiatives, producing local work products, and so forth. And again, also something to clue you into a little bit is chapters are a little bit different. Virtually all the chapters outside the United States are national chapters, which means it's a chapter for a country. Okay, and that gives it a little bit different character. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bigger. There are some chapters in the United States that are bigger than some of the country, national chapters, but it's a little bit different character. So, and of course, we have national chapters even in the Americas sector because, Canada, which is just sort of reforming, will be a national chapter for Canada. Brazil has a forming chapter, it's established chapter that's for the country of Brazil. All right. So critical success factors for chapters then, continuously recruiting leadership. I think this is a key one we see again and again. Sometimes chapters get a little caught when they have a set of officers and the officers are ready to re-elect their replacements and they don't have anybody handy. So be thinking about that as you're going. Like one of your jobs as an officer is be thinking about who might succeed you, right? And I love to see contested elections in INCOSE, meaning there's more than one candidate for the position, right? In other words, it's not just one slate with one set of officers, right? That it should be something that you'd like to build up as something desirable, right? So that people want to do this. And there's a couple of people who want to be president next year, and they've got to have an election. That's a great thing.
You guys have seen that?
Yeah, sure. That happens in some LA. I bet it happens. Don't you have? Not really? Not lately? Okay.
It's the most critical role of past presidents.
Okay.
The person has usually been involved for a number of years.
Yep.
To approach persons and encourage them to.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's it. Farming that.
Being said, the charter allows for anybody to run for any position.
Well, that's right.
Past president.
Yep. Exactly. Except for past president. That makes sense, right? All right. So leadership and teamwork, chapter planning. Don's going to talk more in depth about some very great resources we have to help you do chapter planning, but that's a real key one, right? That tends to be a real success factor in a chapter is how much the chapter gets together and plans their activities for the year and also does continual planning sort of quarter by quarter. Tends to make a big difference in how the chapter works out over the year. All right. So why chapters? Professional exchange, the local Did I hit the wrong button? That looks familiar. Didn't we just do this? There we go. All right, fine. Good enough, I think. I was having deja vu there. I don't know. All right. So chapters have responsibilities. The INCOSE bylaws, which is posted here, govern how chapters are set up and so forth. It's about creating programs for local membership, holding their elections, using the central office and so forth, and having regular meetings. These are sort of the things that you must do based on the INCOSE bylaws, what chapters have to do. Now that's kind of a minimum. A lot of times, most chapters, I think, have officers, directors meetings more frequently than quarterly. They typically meet monthly. I think that's more of a norm, but this is what the sort of the minimums that you have to do. You can change your bylaws as a chapter, by the way. You have chapter bylaws. Those can be changed through a process that's detailed in the bylaws. Right? All right. What else? Maintain archives of financial status, create communications, participate in communication, communicate with the sector directors. The sector directors that you saw the structure earlier. In the United States, or in the Americas I should say, the sector directors, we have assistant directors assigned to geographic groups of chapters. So you should know who your assistant director is. They, I don't know if we have the list in here, but you'll see that. You have an assistant director that has a scope of about maybe 10 chapters, because there's about 40-some chapters in the United States, and each assistant director has about 10 to a dozen of those that they kind of look after. It's not a level of management or anything. It's more of a resource to you and someone who's a little closer to you than the sector director, you know, to help you and things like that.
Do you have anything that talks about their roles and responsibilities?
I do. I don't know if it's in here this time, but we do have some resources on that. You'll find it in the wiki, which is the source of all chapter information that Don's going to tell you about here very shortly. All right. Financial responsibilities. This is the financial reporting we went over a little while ago. These are things that are probably set up for the most part already for you, and you're stepping into this structure. Unless you're starting a new chapter, a lot of this stuff is already set up, but you should be aware of what's going on. Financial reporting, with the forms that are maintained and the tax ID and so forth. So, and you'll get lots of help. If you're, by the way, if you're in a position of a strong chapter, wanting to help a new chapter start, like you have a satellite that's getting strong enough that they might be their own chapter, you can sort of be a mentor for them and help them and so forth. And we're encouraging that sort of thing. I think that's the best way for chapters to grow. The Washington Metro chapter for many years was a very, very big chapter, still a very, very big chapter, but it ultimately gave birth to several other chapters around the area. That's why you see a Southern Maryland chapter, a Chesapeake chapter that a long time ago came out of the Washington Metro chapter and now are quite strong chapters on their own. All right. Chapters around the world, this is kind of where the chapters are. There's some startup chapters here. I think these are getting more established now. They're even since last year. But you can see a number of the chapters in the U.S. In the other areas, they're mostly national chapters. You mostly see one dot in a country. That's the national chapter, which sometimes has sub-chapters within it as well. Pardon? Yeah. There's been some development since then. All right. All right, let me just roll right on here into the next little section here, chapter officer roles and responsibilities. So it's a privilege as well as a responsibility, as we said, like a lot of things in life, right? So I don't know if you feel like for yourself, if you sort of volunteered for this, or if you were asked to do it, or if you were nominated and elected, I don't know. However you kind of came to it, now you're in it, right? So sometimes we think, oh, this is a volunteer organization, and we kind of use that as an excuse. Well, that works until you have a commitment, right? So now you have a commitment. Now it can't be just, oh, I'm a volunteer. Now you have a responsibility. When it comes time for you to be reelected, then you can decide, right? But now you got a job. So there you go. Are you excited about that? You're not smiling at that. All right. So your chapter success will be directly related to you, as we said, right? It's real-world experience, so we hope you're going to get benefit out of this, both professionally, and I have. I'm not the youngest guy in the room, I don't think, and I've gotten benefit out of it. So I think people at all kind of stages of their career can get benefit out of doing this. You know, younger folks often get new leadership experiences out of it. More mature career people are getting professional development, the chance to sort of give back, you know, guide other people. So wherever you are, there's something to get out of being a leader in a chapter, right? So it's a team. We're not trying to turn you into this guy with all tools and all capabilities, right? But to make it a team. So this is the minimum organization for a chapter. You should know is a president-elect who is the sometimes called the vice president, sometimes just called the president-elect. It's the person who's going to be president next year, and a secretary-treasurer, which could be one person. That's very minimal. I'm not sure I know any chapters that are that set up with that minimal group. Usually it's much more. Most chapters I've found find that 2-year terms are helpful, right? And you can do this in different ways depending on your chapter setup and your bylaws. But often people feel like 1 year is not really enough to get into the job and really get a handle on it and really make a difference with it. It takes kind of a more 2-year term. So some people will do a 2-year term as president-elect and then a 2-year term as president. So you're kind of signing up for a 4-year thing, which is really kind of a nice runway of, you know, a pace, right? As opposed to trying to get in there, do something, and then it's almost time to find your replacement, right? Other roles, here's some other roles that other chapters find helpful. Many chapters have many of these roles, okay? So this is something to think about. These can either be elected based on your bylaws, but you're also free to add any role you want to your board as an appointment, as an additional director, as a director at large, or just as an appointed committee chair or program chair or something. See what I mean? Or what's the word? Program director or something. You know, you can make up roles as you like and add them based on your bylaws and so forth. But typically, you'll have a program chair. That'll kind of be the next thing that's almost always there. So you have a separate treasurer, very often a programs chair. That's an important one I want to mention right now. It's a mistake for a chapter to have a programs chair and think that that programs chair is going to set up all the programs. That now we don't have to worry about programs. We have this programs chair. Go for it. Good luck. No, no, no. Programs are the entire board's responsibility in a chapter. The programs chair might be doing some of the legwork, like reaching out, setting up some of the things, but I think that board should be talking about programs every single board meeting. What programs are coming up? What are your ideas? Who has ideas about speakers, programs? Where should we go? What tutorials? That's a board function. Don't give it to just one person. It's too much of a burden, and you don't get enough creativity usually out of it if it's just coming from one person. See? So make that a whole board function, right? You can have separate programs chairs too. You could have a chair for tutorials and another chair for evening meetings. You can do that sort of thing. Some of the bigger chapters work that way as well. Technical director. Some chapters, especially the international chapter, I should say the national chapters, will have a technical director. Like UK chapter has a technical director who oversees the technical working groups within that chapter. Now, a lot of the US chapters tend not to have that structure, but you can. That's something to think about. Do we want to have working groups within the chapter? Maybe ultimately we should have a technical director to kind of coordinate that stuff. That's a very viable thing. Some have a director of membership that looks after recruiting new members, membership retention, and so forth, and any committees that you want. A liaison with the corporate advisory board. Another aspect to this, look, we have a separate chart on this, I'll tell you, is your chapter can set up relationships with local companies, kind of a local corporate advisory board, and most of them call it that, right? Where I just go to a local company, I say, do you want to have a relationship with us as a chapter where we look at some of the things you need and take that into account and do some projects with you and mutual work, and you have a little bit of promotion and visibility in the chapter, and maybe you find some new people in the chapter that you hire. There's all kinds of mutual benefits that could come out of that kind of a relationship, and that's quite a common thing that's done in, again, the national chapters. In EMEA, the UK has a UK advisory board that is local companies that tie in with that chapter. So does the French chapter and others, right? So chapters in all sectors can do that sort of thing. All right. Planning responsibilities. So this is the process of chapter planning, and you could think of different responsibilities for the different officers. So the president typically leads the chapter planning, but it's a team effort. You're going to use the chapter planning workbook and template that Don's going to show you in a little bit. Very interesting resource and thorough, a great tool. And then setting up with long-range guidance. So you're looking at some of the things that David showed you, the INCOSE mission, the goals, the objectives, the things that are coming down from the board, and which you've given feedback to as well. But then you're also consumers of that and saying, how can our chapter formulate initiatives and programs to kind of help fulfill that, right? And you're part of the fulfillment of these things. That's the idea there. All right. What else? Then there's operational planning too. So this first one is more the strategic. Now there's the more operational. What are we actually going to do? What are the programs? What are the plans for the activities, the actions? Attendance at the big functions, the international workshop and the symposium would be one aspect of that. What other chapters are we going to work with? What are we going to do for membership? What are we doing in communications? Again, the plans that Don will show you, some people look at them, and I'll be honest with you, the reaction is sometimes, oh my gosh, this is huge, because the template is big, it's a lot of pages. But what I like about that is, you don't have, for one thing, you don't have to do it all, as Don will tell you. You're going to do what's appropriate to you, but it doesn't let you forget anything. I mean, just walking through that reminds you of everything. Oh, we should think about that. Oh, we should think about that. Even if, based on your chapter, you do a more modest effort on that, whatever is appropriate for you, it reminds you to do something, so you don't forget about membership, or you don't forget about reaching out to local universities for student divisions, or whatever other aspect it is. All right. What else? More responsibilities here. Working with you elect me, or my replacement, right? I serve a 3-year term as sector director for the Americas. I'm up for re-election at the end of next year, I think it is. Is that right? So the chapter presidents work together to elect the sector director for that sector, and one, as we know, there's 3: one in the Americas, one in Europe, and EMEA, and one in Asia, Oceania. All right. You also, as a chapter leader, chapter president, provide leadership to the profession, to the board, you chair the chapter meetings, you maintain all aspects of the chapter. Obviously, you're the captain of the ship, so you're responsible for everything that goes on the ship, right? It's that kind of philosophy, right? But you don't want to be doing it alone. You want a team of people working with you. You also, another great tool is the Chapter Circle Awards. So the Chapter Circle Awards, the purpose of that, and you'll hear more detail about this later, but the purpose of it is to help your chapter. all right? Not only help your chapter get an award, that's nice, but the more important purpose is help guide your chapter into what things are good to do. Like, so the criteria in the award are the things that chapters ought to be doing. So I've heard again and again people tell me, you know, yeah, it's nice that we got the award, but even more important was using the criteria to kind of guide what's important to the chapter. You know, we saw that there's points for this. Oh, maybe we ought to do that. That'd be a good thing to do, right? Not just for the points, but because it's a good thing to do. See? So that's kind of the purpose of that whole award thing. So I'd highly encourage you to pursue a Circle Award, whether you care about the award itself or not. It's a useful exercise. And most active chapters, I think, can qualify for some level of the award. It's not that high a bar. Now the gold, that you really got to be doing some stuff, right? But for the other levels, normal activity is good. And being an award-winning chapter, I think, is a good thing. I think it encourages more people to join, makes you feel better about your chapter. There's a lot of advantages to the whole awards thing. All right, that's my little bit on that. All right, move on here. So here's a sample checklist, even to help you see the things you might need to be doing month by month and sort of week by week. This is, again, a guide for you for activities, mostly emphasizing planning in the early parts of the year, and then this rolling plan around the middle of the year, thinking about new candidates for officers, getting ahead of that, thinking about that, bringing them in, publishing officers, holding the elections and that sort of thing, the results going to INCOSE, working out your chapter evidence for Circle Awards. We're going to a philosophy, by the way, as you'll probably hear later about the awards, of uploading and recording chapter results sort of throughout the year. What many people have told us is it's kind of a big pain if you wait till the very end to try to pull everything together for the whole year. So if you can do it periodically as you go, it's much easier, right, and more effective. Past presidents, not a hard and fast set of rules, but here's some suggested tasks for a past president. Don't let them get away. A lot of times the chapter just leaves. Chapter president says, that's over, I'm out of here. You know? But you want to keep them around because they can assist the president in transition. They volunteer to be considered. They're not recommended to oversee the Circle Awards. In fact, it's better for someone coming into the leadership to be doing the Circle Awards than someone on the way out. See what I mean? In fact, one of my first jobs, I was an interim secretary for the WMA chapter. They needed someone to fill in for 6 months as secretary. That's how I got roped into this years ago. That's how I started. And one of my jobs as the stand-in secretary was to do the Circle Awards for the biggest chapter in INCOSE, having never done any of this before. And so I learned a lot in that process, right? Scrambling around, trying to pull everything. We got gold award that year, you know, so I found enough points, you know, by scrambling around. But it was a job for someone who was brand new, right? All right, president-elect, oversee the Circle Awards. I think that's a really good idea. Be the kind of the coordinator for the evidence. That's a good job for that person as well. They may take on other responsibilities, programs, mentor other prospective leaders, and so forth. The INCOSE model is pretty good. INCOSE, as you may know, the president-elect of INCOSE, who right now is Alan Harding, acts as the operations manager for all of INCOSE. So the way the INCOSE board works, the incoming president-elect is the operations manager for the organization. So that's an interesting model in a chapter, right? They sort of manage some of the mechanics while the current president is kind of leading strategically more, right? That's a possible pattern. All right, vice president. There could be one or more vice presidents depending on that. Chapter, the responsibilities are maybe one or more areas, kind of flexible depending on your definition. It could be developing the chapters, assisting with programs, membership, and so forth. Vice president is one that I think you do want to give a little thought to what they should do. Otherwise, often the vice president has nothing specific to do, and that's not so good, right? So think about giving them some specific responsibilities, I think is a good idea. Secretary, treasurer, this is a little more obvious what they need to do, right? And often that's written down. They're recording minutes, overseeing communications, mentoring members, looking after fiscal matters. The treasurer, of course, managing the bank accounts, and the obvious stuff that a secretary and treasurer will do, reporting the income and expenses and so on. So that's a little more clear. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and we'll go on to the next piece with Don. Let me go ahead and change videos here.
Yeah, we need a 5-minute break.